All right. Good morning to those of you on the East Coast. Good morning also to those of you on the West Coast. I'm your host, Brandon Troy, also co creator of Movers and Shakers Unlimited. And thanks so much for joining us wherever you're watching from, whether you're watching it live or if you're watching it, after the fact. If you had a chance to take a look at the title, you'll know that we have a awesome guest on tap for you guys. They were here with us last week, but wanted to welcome them back because they have some awesome things going at Sundance. So just to give a quick introduction to the guest that we have, the person that I have here, they don't need any introduction as they've provided their talents as a composer, not only in projects such as Creep Show on a small screen, but also on the big screen for projects such as Pearl, The Swearing Jar, and Founders Day. Most recently, just to name a few. Right now at Sundance, they are promoting their most recent work in the upcoming film, Your Monster. It is my pleasure to welcome Tim Williams. Let me bring him back. Tim, how's it going, sir? How's it going over in Sundance currently?
It's fun here. My first time to Sundance, so I'm just kind of trying to soak it all in. It's
Cool. Hopefully you're keeping cool because we're freezing over here on the East Coast. Freezing.
it's freezing here in Utah as well. So I have my big jackets, and I one of the things they're handing out at all the events are these are these beanies, and so that's how cold it is. No matter where you go, they're giving you head coverings and stuff like that just to keep you warm. So
Man,
um,
man, can't imagine. But with that being said, first and foremost, congratulations with your monster. I understand that
thank you.
it had its premiere on Thursday. So, can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that and how it's been? As you said, it's your first time, so your first rodeo, so to speak, at Sundance. So, go ahead.
Yeah, um, it premiered at the Egyptian Theatre, which is one of the main theaters here on Main Street, on the main strip of Sundance. And as you can imagine, it's a bit of a zoo here. There's people everywhere. Uh, we had just a wonderful reception to start with. We did the whole red carpet thing. We have Melissa Barrera, who, of course, I'm sure everyone's very familiar with from Scream and multiple other amazing movies. She stars in Your Monster, and Megan Faye, who people would know from White Lotus, the second season. Again, she's amazing. She's one of the leads. Tommy Dewey plays the monster. And just to fill you in on the premise of the movie, it's a romantic comedy horror. If you can compute that in your brain, it's one of those things that is an interesting mashup. It's basically this woman, Laura, who uh, finds out that she has cancer and then gets dumped by her asshole of a boyfriend, and basically is in this, her life has fallen apart, and there's something in the house that's rather terrifying, and it turns out it's this monster that lives in her closet that she's known since childhood. And another favorite place, of course, for the monster is under the bed. But it's sort of a Beauty and the Beast story where the monster initially wants her to leave, and the two of them kind of begin to fall in love with each other, and it has a great message for her about, as she kind of embraces kind of Monster's whole philosophy. She begins to find her voice, and she begins to push back against all the sort of tragedies and just the way she's been treated. So it's really a story about finding your voice, being able to stand up for yourself, and kind of embrace your inner monster is the theme. But yeah, we had just an incredible turnout, and the audience just loved it. It was it's an interesting film. It's very adventurous. It's a very new idea to try and combine these two different genres. A lot of people, I think really enjoyed this kind of a mashup. You know, so it's not your standard romantic comedy and feel good film. It's a lot of fun. It's a very funny film, but it has a lot of heart to it, and some interesting twists and turns that take you down sort of the horror road as well.
Awesome, awesome. So, to speak further about it and as you were, just mentioning just the unique mashup of genres that are at play with this film, can you talk about how that involvement came into play? Because I know even last week, we were talking about how it can be different from film to film of having that second nature of working prior with a given filmmaker, or maybe working the first time with a filmmaker. So can you share that about getting involved with this project?
Yeah, Carolyn Lindy is the director and the writer, and she always says it's sort of loosely based on a true story, and it was. She was diagnosed with cancer, and she literally got dumped in a text by her boyfriend when he found out that she had cancer, and was just kind of like, no, I can't deal with that. It's too much. So it's a lot of it is sort of her own experiences, but she's an amazing director, an incredible sort of new voice, and it was a real pleasure to get introduced to her. She obviously knew of my work from Pearl, and some of the other films I've done, like Brightburn, and I've done a lot of horror, and I've done a lot of a few rom-coms. I did Finding You, which is the one set in Ireland, which again is just a really fun, light, romantic comedy. And also for Founders Day director Eric Blomquist, I've just finished a film called Intermedium, which is another really fun kind of mashup rom-com of a girl who falls in love with the ghost in her room. So similar similar idea of twisting the rom-com. But Carolyn and I met, and I talked through my thoughts on the film, which were that we should not play the comedy, not let that comedy be the comedy, but really play it straight, as though this isn't a monster. Play it like it's a true kind of romantic interest. And interestingly, everyone's like, man, the monster's pretty sexy. That seems to be the overriding comment, and that's how I wanted to play the music, to play it really as a romance, and then obviously the horror aspect of it, play that fairly straight ahead. I always find that comedy plays better if you play it straight, if the music is straight.
Yeah,
I'm not a,
situational.
yeah, I'm not a. There's very few cases where true like comedic music, something like Curb Your Enthusiasm, comedy music works very well in that context. But often I think comedy is much stronger if you play it, more seriously, and more straight ahead, because then the comedy is rooted in reality.
Definitely, definitely. So in speaking, further to that, what does that look like going forward with what's planned, with this film? Because I know oftentimes when you are releasing it out to the world, so to speak, to various audiences, you go on basically a circuit, if you will, with a given film. So, is that the intention with this film, or and if so, what are some additional plans with additional festivals that you guys are intending of having this scene?
Yeah, I am not sure what the next steps on the film are. I know that they're currently in the process of selling the film, finding a distributor for it. And so, again, as a composer, you're kind of waiting, you're not privy to all the uh, current workings on the film, but I know that's the intention, is to potentially do some other festivals. I know there's been some discussion about other festivals, and obviously that interesting topic of who will ultimately distribute the film. But it's a really fun film. I think it definitely seems to resonate with millennials, and particularly women who really sort of understand the core message of the film. And so that's exciting to see. It's exciting to work on films that feel fresh, feel original, have a fresh voice, fresh perspective, and are just trying to do things differently. Trying to take what are well trodden areas, and just try and twist them, do something new. The monster is really funny. Tommy Dewey does a great job. It's almost got a Bill Hader vibe, and so it works really, really well, once you sort of get over the shock that it is the monster. Um,
Gotcha. I'm intrigued to see to definitely check it out because I love horror films. I love comedies and the mashup that you're describing here is seems like a unique and interesting mix. So, uh, but outside of that film, of course, I wanted to also dive into another part of your filmography, of course. I know you're smiling now because I wanted to also dive into Brightburn, of course. You just mentioning it, just before, and we're not exactly on 5 years, but we're coming up on 5 years as of this year. So I would be remiss not to mention that film, and I feel like even though it has, I feel like it has gotten almost like a cult following, if you will, where it had its audience, but I feel like it got its audience. I feel like after the fact more so than upon release. And in talking about that film, can you just talk about that idea of and it's mentioned all the time with this film, that concept of nature versus nurture that's so
Right.
prevalent in that film, and just that idea of because I watched it recently, just in lieu of chatting with you and looking back on it after all this time, and how the how you were able to or your intention of trying to find those moments to have music that seems very hopeful, of what the possibility could be, of what the future of this character could be, in those formative years, but then also sprinkling it in with like tones of foreboding or danger, if you will.
Yeah, it's funny because they just on Instagram they just put a picture of me at Sundance, and Dave Yarvo, the director of Brightburn, was like, wrote "Hell yeah" on the on my post literally this morning. I just saw it, so uh,
Nice.
it puts me in mood of him. But yeah, Dave Yarvo is an amazing director. The premise of Brightburn, for those who haven't seen it, is basically um, what if Superman went bad. It's basically Breaking Bad for Superman.
Yeah.
And it's the story of a young boy who landed on Earth and was raised by two parents, played by David Denham and Elizabeth. I'm stupidly blanking on her last name. You probably know what it is. Um, incredible actors. And the idea was what would happen if um, instead of the nature of Superman being to be helpful to mankind and good, what if he used his powers for evil and was drawn that way? And there's an interesting metaphor that's used in the film about bees and wasps and what the difference is. And bees create honey and are
Yes.
useful.
Yeah.
Wasps, on the other hand, are predatory and will take over the nest and kill. And that was sort of the whole point of, is it nature, is it nurture, and the boy struggles with Brandon, the boy struggles with which path to take. And obviously his there's a cue called urges, where it is the sense of his being drawn to evil that starts to take over, and how that manifests through,
Manifest. Yeah.
yeah, through the world. So musically, again, talking about combination of mixing, mashing up genres. This was one that did exactly the same thing, where you have, it's a horror film, but it's also a superhero film, and at the time there weren't a lot of films that tried to put those two things together. So in terms of approaching it musically, we needed to have a thematic idea that was able to capture the sense of hope. Like, could this, if he was good, he'd become Superman, but it also needed to be able to be twisted, and there's a lot of cues, particularly early on, that are written specifically to be very beautiful, heroic cues, but I had the orchestra play them out of tune. I constantly just said, keep wavering the tone, and here's this professional
Yeah, because
orchestrator.
you're doing this twisted. Yeah, you're alluding to
Yeah,
how twisted this universe is. Of course. Yeah.
right. And so I had this, I had Abbey Road with the best players in the world sitting there playing, and they're playing it. I'm going, this sounds so beautiful, so good, but I don't want you to play it well. I want you to play it like off kilter and out of tune and sound like a high school band, just so it's creepy and doesn't sit. It doesn't feel like it's something feels off about it. So so that was kind of the approach for a lot of the beginning, was the sense of feeling unsettled. One of the other instruments I used a lot, which was I really love and was very effective, is the solo fiddle, because they're out in this farm in the middle of nowhere, and I needed something to give a sense of loneliness and isolation, and something that sort of spoke to kind of farm life. And this sort of solo fiddle, um, played by Charlie Bisharat, who's an amazing violinist. He did these sort of fiddle things that again had this sort of beautiful mix of being very beautiful and also slightly off kilter, like you're in the middle of nowhere, isolated, something might go wrong. I think that's one of the themes that I really like to play with a lot. I am currently working on a horror film called Somewhere in Dreamland with Leyline Entertainment, who did Everything Everywhere All at Once, and it's an incredible sort of horror film about a creature called Sandman. And again, it's playing with this idea of off kilter beauty, something that feels beautiful, but there's something wrong with it. And in this particular case, we're using vocals to do that, where it's almost like this beautiful chorale for the Sandman, but it's we're doing a version that is pure and gorgeous and sounds just feels warm and thematic and beautiful and emotional. And then against that, we do all this kind of bending and making it feel off kilter. So I don't know. I think I'm kind of drawn to that approach. Like even with Pearl, we did that. The final scene of Pearl, you have this kind of very beautiful theme, she's staring at the camera, but then against it we have this whole sort of big huge dissonance that kind of takes over and eventually becomes the forward sound as this complete sort of dissonance against this beautiful theme. So I don't know, it's sort of a theme I like to play with, this mixture of something that could be a really beautiful cue, but there's something just really off about it and disturbed.
Gotcha. And I'm going to assume, seeing that you've worked with Gunn on prior projects with Super, and of course with Guardians, and even going so back as far as Slither.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Uh, in thinking of that prior relationship of working on all those projects, I'm assuming that you were able to kind of get involved early, or was this like a unique circumstance where it came later? Because the only reason why I asked that is with it being knowing that it is falling within that superhero realm, was there always the intention of having what we were just discussing, of having that intention of knowing where the character begins and where he ends, versus perhaps kind of feeling not obligated. I don't think that's the right word, but feeling as if you kind of had to allude to the what the character who the character was inspired by, if that makes any sense, of
Yeah,
what
no, it
was
totally does.
there any pressure there at first of saying, should we go this way, or should we really just focus in on what's going on specifically with that character's journey?
Well, so the script was written by James Gunn's brothers, and the whole approach of the film was very much like a guerrilla style approach to the film, where you can't say Superman. It's sort of in a very cryptic way alluding to Superman, but it's not that property. So there was always that sense that this film was very subversive, and purely for fun. It was never something that could officially be part of any franchise or brand. So I think that was part of the excitement about doing the film was it really was a speculative thing of what if a character like Superman ended up bad. So it was always the intention to do it as a horror film, but it, you know, again, very clearly we were not um, trying to take something official or take an official Superman story and develop that. So I think it's interesting that James has ended up at DC, you know, but you know, and I think, but it definitely it was one of those just those very fun films that was done. I think, you know, you see a lot of those coming out now, especially. I think there'll be a slew of, now that Mickey Mouse is out of copyright, there'll probably be a slew of horror Mickey Mouse, and there's always been a few
Oh yeah,
horror
it's coming.
Disneyland things.
It's
Yeah,
coming.
yeah. So, but I think that was the same. It was the same kind of spirit behind you know, behind Brightburn, which was just to have some fun with taking a character that was in everybody's mind and then twisting it and taking a different story route with it. And it's such a fun film. It's such a great film. It's a great premise, and the actors in it are so good. And I spoke with Dave. I had lunch with him about a year ago, and I said, "Is there ever going to be a sequel? Because I'd love to see it." And he was so funny. He's like, "I keep in touch with the actor who played the boy, and he's in his teens now." And I was like, "Come on, this would be perfect for a sequel. You know, all those, you know, teenage hormones raging plus all that superpower. I mean, the story kind of writes itself." And he
And you
said,
built a whole universe at the end, I might add. So
"I know."
like,
So we'll see, but yeah, he said the teenager. He's a teenager now, and he said the actor is perfect for, like, he still is, would be absolutely perfect for carrying on the franchise, um, but as yet there's no sort of official word on a sequel. But it would be fun to do, you know, to do Brightburn teenager.
indeed. And you must be psychic, Tim, because that's actually where I was going to go. Because I remember this time last week, we were talking about how there are always, collaborations that are very fruitful, especially between composers and filmmakers. And just as I said with Gunn, whether it's been in a producer capacity with Brightburn or as a filmmaker with other projects that you've done, whether it's with, as I said, Slither or the Guardians or even Super, which has a weird connection to Brightburn, a fun connection to Brightburn. Um, a lot of times, just as you mentioned, those collaborations happen a lot. So I have to ask, you already talked about Brightburn too, and you maybe you're not at liberty to say, but have there been like discussions of those collaborations continuing, especially seeing where those said folks are, as you just said with Gunn.
Yeah, there's nothing official at the moment that I can talk to, but you know, it's always wonderful working with incredible directors and filmmakers, and you know, one of the ones right now that has been really exciting has been doing three films with Eric Blomquist and Carson Blomquist. They have. I did their She Came from the Woods. They just released Founders Day, which is actually in the movie theaters right now. You can go and see
Yes,
it. It's a limited release. I think it's only 900 screens. So you know, but it's a really fun. If you like slasher films, this is a super fun slasher film. And then of course Into Medium, which is a really beautiful rom com that they've done about a girl who actually she has OCD, and and then she falls in love with this very messy ghost in her room, and kind of the falling out of how that happens. But yeah, no, I there's a number of directors who I've done multiple projects with, and there's something that's really nice about working with directors that you have worked with before, because you can develop the shorthand. So they'll say, "Oh, remember what you did for this film? Remember what you did here? I think that would work well here." And again, even just simple things, language, like when you work with someone for a long time, for example, you know, with Dave Yarvo on Brightburn, you know, he would say needs more tension, which for me would always translate to tremolo strings, doing something tremolo strings. So once we had that shorthand, once I knew what when he was asking for something, how to translate that back in musical terms, and I think that type of relationship is good because you start out with a sense of trust. One of the things that's hard when you're a composer is always that sense of, am I going to get fired off this project because I'm not delivering? And it's so much better to write from a position of, like, some of the best scores I feel like I've ever done have been written from a point of view where it's the director just says, do what you do, go nuts, go far. If you go too far, I'll pull you back. But I trust you. And that for me is very liberating. It helps me try different things, create unusual scores, and to be bold as a musical voice. And I think it always yields more interesting results than writing from a place of safety and going, well, I'm just going to hopefully get this cue approved. So that's the nice thing when you work with directors a bunch, and that sense of trust is there. You really can innovate, and you really can try and push the boundaries of film scoring and what you've done before. So I love those collaborations.
All right, excellent, excellent. Well, Tim, it's always a pleasure to have you here on the show. Thank you so much for hopping on again, live from Sundance. Before I let you go, can you tell folks where they can find you?
Yes, I'm Timothy Williams Official on Instagram, and my website is timothywilliams.net. If you want to check out my website, my website's a little out of date, so that's my next thing to do, is to update it with all these fun new projects that I've just finished. Um,
Cool, cool, awesome. Well, as I said again, I want to thank Tim for hopping on and talking about your monster, as well as humoring me and also talking about Brightburn as well. I really do appreciate it. I'm your host, Brandon Troy, host and co-creator of Movers and Shakers Unlimited. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be safe out there, and see you soon.